Okay, so that's the basics of memos. And I think you should understand generally what the memos look like and what they do based on these examples. Now, next, I'm going to cover a couple examples of letters. Again, your book does a pretty good job, it's just a little on the short side. Letters are much more formal. If you get a letter from your job, it's usually to announce something really formal, like a change in your benefits, like your health insurance, or you're getting hired, or you're getting fired. Generally, you won't get too many letters from your work to you unless it's like something sort of serious. But they can be sent internally from somebody in the company to somebody in the company. But generally, they are more often written from someone in the company to someone like a customer, or from a customer to the company. So they are usually external. Okay, and letters can be written for a variety of reasons. There's a few basic ones. You're trying to sell something. You're we're trying, which we call a sales letter. You're trying to ask for something like money, which we call a claim letter. You're responding to someone's request for something, which is we call an adjustment letter. Okay, and these are sort of the basic types of information that you get in a letter. Letters usually in the professional world are written in block paragraph, and they have addresses at the top, and we'll go over a couple examples of that. But because they are generally written to customers and from customers, one of the really key things here is tone and making sure that you're saying things in the most professional and most polite way possible. So I'm going to go over some examples that will hopefully help you understand letters better.
All right, guys, so I'm just going to go over some example letters with you and go over the formatting and some examples of how they work. They will help you with the assignments in this week. So letters are the most formal of the different kinds of correspondence. And for that reason, people often try to sound overly formal when they write them, which is a mistake because that makes it hard for the reader to understand some of the words that you're using and the way you're using them. It's always better to write direct, simple, clear language. Just say what you're trying to say in the easiest way to say it. Don't sound overly complicated because there's no reason to. Okay, a couple of things. Addresses are always at the top of a letter. And the way it always works is my address first, their address second. This is similar to an envelope. When I'm writing an envelope to send out a letter, I would put my address up here and their address here. Well, when you're reading the envelope, you're also going to see that my address is first, their address is second. That's the same thing here. My address first, their address second. In between, you would have the date, or you could put the date after the second address. Either one is fine. It's a personal preference, and your company might have a preference. Now, about my address at the top, if I'm writing from my company might have some kind of logo at the top of the letter, which would have my company's address underneath the logo. And if that's the case, I would not type out my address again. But I also wouldn't invent logos. If you are a single person writing from home, not from your company, just write out the address. Don't go on your computer and create a logo. Just write out your address. Okay. Another thing, just write dear so and so. Don't be overly complicated with to whom it may concern or whatever else. You just dear so and so. And the same thing down here, you want to end your letter with sincerely. Most of the time, sometimes students will try to be overly creative with the way they end a letter with like respectfully yours truly, forever yours. And some of those are kind of intimate. They're kind of a better way to end a love letter than a professional letter. So you want to be really careful with how you end the letter. Sincerely is always a very safe option. If you are friends with the person you are writing the letter to, you could end it with best wishes or kind regards. But honestly, sincerely is the best option. Okay, notice that everything on the page lines up on the left, and these are block paragraphs, so I'm not indenting. I am putting everything all the way to the left. Instead, I skip a line between paragraphs to show where a paragraph ends and the next one begins, instead of indenting at the beginning of the paragraph as you would in less formal writing, or you may have learned to do in essay writing for class. We don't do that in professional writing. We just write in professional block paragraphs. Now, this is an example of a cover letter. A cover letter is a letter that you write with your resume, and you send it explaining the job you want, why you think you're qualified, and what you want them to notice about your resume. So it's a way of selling yourself. It's very similar to a sales letter in some ways, and this is a well organized one, right? They start by identifying what they're applying for, they go over their qualifications, and then they ask to speak to the person in charge when they can to talk about the job more. Okay, and then they close the letter. Now, a note about the way they close the letter: there should be more space in between the end and the typed name so that you could print and sign in pen. So typically we would write sincerely, and then we would type our name, and we would hit enter 4 times in between so that after we print it out, we have enough space to come with a pen and sign our names. So I should have enough space to sign here, which it doesn't look like I do. But other than that, this letter is very good. Now, this is an example of a claim letter. A claim letter is a letter that you send explaining a claim that you have for either money or a product. In other words, you're saying, hey, you owe me money, or hey, you owe me a product. Companies send these to each other, and you can send it to a company saying, we paid for this and we didn't get it, we paid for it and we got something defective, we feel like you owe us money, we feel like you owe us a replacement product, something like that. Okay, so I'm going to go over some of these examples. So they have the address at the top, and this is my address, their address at the bottom, this is the person who gets the letter, and then the date in between, which again, it could have come here instead and that would have been fine. And they keep it simple with Dear Mr. Brown. So on August 1st, I bought a Rough and Ready Model 600 mountain bike from your store. When I got the bike home, I noticed that the front tire was soft. I used a hand pump to inflate the tire. After riding the bike less than a mile, the tire was soft again. I brought the bike back to your shop on 8/2. You tested the tire and told me it was fine and filled it with air. The tire is still losing air. Every time I ride the bike, I need to pump the tire. I left detailed messages on your voicemail on 8/4 and 8/5, and you have not returned my phone calls. I am enclosing a copy of your store warranty. It states that your store will replace defective parts on a bike within the first 30 days of purchase. According to your written policy, I am entitled to a new front tire. Please call me to arrange a time for me to bring the bike in for repair. If I don't hear from you, I will contact the local Better Business Bureau to resolve this problem. Thank you for taking care of this sincerely. Now, other than this little threatening line at the end, threatening to report them, the letter's pretty good. This indicates that they're very, very angry, but otherwise it's good. They explain, I bought the bike and you tried to fix it. It's still not working. And then also that I am going to need a replacement or a repair, or else I'm going to take other measures. Okay, so it's organized, and then thanks them. Now there should be 4 spaces here so that I have enough space to sign, but otherwise this is a very good letter. All right, 2 more quick letters. So again, this one's a pretty good claim letter. It's very short, but it gets to the point. So the address of the sender, address of the reader, date here, dear so-and-so. As someone who has worked with your company for over 3 years, we were very disappointed to see the documents you produced for our latest publicity campaign. As our written agreement stipulated, we expected full color leaflets with fancy explanatory texts, but instead we found the black and white photos had been included in the prepared leaflets. I think you will agree that a communication problem exists. We would like you to send out a photographer to provide us with the promised colored coverage, or provide us with a refund. Yours truly. So they go over what they need to go over to explain why they believe they are entitled to either a refund or better product. They agreed to colored photos and they received black and white ones. And they have, in this case, left enough room here for the signature like they should. This yours truly is a little bit informal. We want to keep it simple. Yours truly implies that they are giving themselves to that person, which is very intimate for a professional letter. And there's places where there's too much space. They hit enter too many times. But other than that, the letter is overall very good and shows us a good organized letter. The last letter is an example of an adjustment letter. Now, an adjustment letter is what you get back after sending a claim letter. If I say, hey, you owe me money, or hey, you owe me a product, the person writes back to you saying, so sorry, this is what we'll give you, or they write back saying, here's why we don't think we owe you anything. So here's an example of an adjustment letter. So address of the sender, address of the reader, and in this case we have the date after the two addresses, which is correct too. Dear Mr. Davis, I want to apologize for the mistake we made in sending you the wrong bicycle. We take order fulfillment very seriously and are investigating the cause of this incident. In the meantime, we wish to send you the bicycle you ordered along with a prepaid shipping voucher to send back the incorrect bike as a token of our appreciation for your business. We also want to include a $100 gift card that you can use in our store. Again, we apologize for the inconvenience. Thank you for your business. So short, to the point, well organized. Here we have an apology. Here we have what we're going to do for you, and then a thank you for being our customer. Sincerely, okay, typed out name, typed out title if you have one, and enough space to sign afterwards. So this is a very good letter, and you don't have to write more than you need to, but don't leave your customer with questions. Tell them everything they need to know, but you don't have to go on and on and on just to fill up the letter. A short letter is okay. All right, last thing I'm going to go over is the direct approach versus the indirect approach. Now, 9 times out of 10 in professional communication, you're going to use the direct approach. So when I went over memos, I talked about the direct approach a lot. In the direct approach, in your subject or in the first line, you state your reason for writing immediately. Then the rest of the document gives supporting information. So if I'm going to tell you that there's a power outage, then the rest of the document is going to tell me what you need to know about that power outage. But I tell you right away, there's going to be a power outage. Every once in a while, you're going to use the indirect approach. In the indirect approach, you basically switch these two, okay? You're going to give the supporting information, then explain why you're writing. The reason you would use the indirect approach is you're going to use it to deliver bad news. Okay, so when I'm using the direct approach, again, that's the subject line of the first sentence of the email, letter, memo, identifying the reason for writing, and this is what we're going to use 9 times out of 10. But every once in a while, I need to tell somebody something they really don't want to hear. And if I'm thinking about my reader and how my reader wants to hear bad news, you don't want to hear bad news in the very first sentence. So, for example, if I'm writing you to explain to you that you're fired, I'm not going to say, Dear Diego, you're fired, right? That's really not the way I would do it. Instead, I would take the time to go over how there's been cutbacks at the company, how we've tried to avoid laying off people, and I would basically give all of my reasons for why I have to fire Diego before I tell Diego that he's fired. So that by the time I get to that news, he understands what's coming. So, for example, if I'm going to tell someone that I am relocating them to a different part of the company, I would do the same thing. I would explain what is happening that's going to cause me to shut down their part of the company and say, dear Joanna, as you know, our blank division hasn't been doing that well. As you know, last year we tried to do this, this, and this to bring up sales. We've done everything we can to bring up sales, but unfortunately, we have to close your division, which means we're going to have to relocate you to a different part of the company. So when you're telling someone something that they really, really don't want to know, really bad news, you're going to tell them the supporting information first and then the reason for writing. All other times, you would say right away why you're writing and then give the supporting information. You have to attend this training, and here's everything you need to know about the training. So if you're just reporting information, you want to use this one, which is what you're going to be doing a lot of the time in technical and professional writing, just reporting information. But for those few times where you have to deliver bad news, you're going to use the indirect approach. So the indirect approach, again, you're going to use it to deliver bad news. You're setting up the context for bad news. Then you state the bad news. And here's a key point: move back to nice things right afterwards. So you also don't want to end on the bad news. You don't want to start on the bad news. You don't want to end on the bad news. We sometimes refer to this as like a bad news sandwich. So in the example, when I say, Joanna, all these things are happening. We tried and tried and tried, but we can't make it work. So bad news, we're going to close your division and we have to relocate you. But then I would want to end the letter by saying some nice things like, you're really valuable to the company. We're sure you're going to fit in just fine in your new division. We're so happy to have you with us, or something like that. So you want to move back to nice stuff. Another thing is, you don't want to repeat the bad news or spend longer stating it than necessary. So one mistake that a lot of students make is that they'll just keep saying it over and over and over and over again when they're writing a document, like, you're fired. Did we mention you're fired? We're so sorry we have to fire you. We really apologize for having to fire you. You don't want to just keep repeating it over and over and over again. And if you can say it in one sentence, say it in one sentence and move back to the nice statements. Don't say it in 6 sentences, because you don't want your reader to be focusing on the bad news. You want to try to set them up for the bad news, state the bad news, and then manage their mood, right? So you want them to end the letter or memo or email feeling okay about the decision. So you're going to move back to nice statements, okay? So in this unit, there's going to be times where you have to deliver bad news, and you need to decide if your memo or letter or email is an example of you reporting information, and if it's easier for your reader to know the information right away and then just get supporting details after, or are you telling them something they really don't want to hear, and would it be better for you to set up the context first, state the bad news, and then move back to nice statements? So think about that when you're writing and see which of the two organizations work best for you. All right, if you have any questions, let me know.